All right, hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you. Thank you so much for everyone that's been here promptly so that we can start at 6 or shortly thereafter. We're just waiting for the candidate to have a glass of ice water that's coming from downstairs, and we'll start right after that. My name is Joel Lewis with Citizen Action of Wisconsin, for those of you who don't know who I am. We have what's called an organizing cooperative. So we have approximately 200 members that pay dues in every month to fund my job. They then democratically elect a steering committee. Our chair of the steering committee is Don Dunphy. He's right here. And you'll get to see him in a little bit. He'll be asking one of the questions tonight. The questions that we'll be getting asked are based off of a progressive platform that all of our members across the state, both urban and rural, had the ability to contribute to. And we have asked either co-op members or strong allies in the community to ask the questions tonight. We are having Tricia go first for the first hour and then Lawrence Dale for the second hour. There was an event in Rice Lake a couple of weeks back where it was the opposite, where Lawrence went first and Tricia went second. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Tricia Zunker, one of the candidates for the 7th Congressional District of Wisconsin.
Thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate that you prioritize this, and some of you have heard me so many times, so sorry you're going to have to sit through my same spiel. Anyway, I am Tricia Zunker. I'm one of the Democratic candidates for the Wisconsin 7th Congressional District special election. And just so we can get this out very clearly at the outset, please mark your calendars. February 18th, primary. That is the first day, and then May 12th. That is the general election. And that is really the date we have to make sure we do not forget, because that's the day that we flip this district back to blue. And we make Wisconsin blue again. And that really is the pathway to achieving what is so desperately needed in this country, which is real representation. It all starts here with Wisconsin 7. So for those of you who don't know me, I am a co-op member. I've been a co-op member ever since I moved back to Wausau. And I say moved back to Wausau because this is where I was born and raised. I have deep roots in this community. I am a member of Ho-Chunk Nation. I'm Ho-Chunk on my dad's side. He was my Ho-Chunk parents. And then I come from generations of dairy farmers on my mom's side. My grandpa had a dairy farm in the town of Easton, just outside of Wausau. And he farmed there until he couldn't farm any longer, until his body gave out, like so many of our farmers do on our small farms. Well, I grew up in a strong union household. My mom is a union member. She is a USW Local 2-224 union member. And in fact, I received the United Steelworkers District 2 endorsement of this candidacy just last week. That is a deep honor for me, given my mom's experience. And actually, when I was 12 years old, I was out on the picket lines with my mom and her coworkers when James River was striking in 1992 here in Wausau. Some of you might remember that strike. I am a first-generation college graduate. I went to University of Wisconsin, and I earned a triple major and a certificate in 4 years. And I point that out because that's a ton of work to do in 4 years, especially because I also had to work 2 jobs. I had some assistance from my tribe, Ho-Chunk Nation. I had scholarships, financial aid, but I also had to work 2 jobs to get myself through school. I then went to law school. I attended UCLA, Youth School of Law, and the reason I chose UCLA was for its stellar federal Indian law and tribal legal development program. As a Ho-Chunk woman, it was important for me to bring that education and experience back to Wisconsin, which is exactly what I did. Because I was elected to the seat of Associate Justice on the Ho-Chunk Supreme Court, there was a special election in my tribe, what an opportunity special elections bring. And I campaigned really hard for that seat. I was the underdog of 4 candidates. And for those of you who don't know, of the 11 federally recognized tribes in Wisconsin, Ho-Chunk Nation is the only one without reservation land. We have our lands held in federal trust in pockets throughout the state. So what that looked like was I was flying back and campaigning in Wittenberg and Nakusa in our communities there. And then going back to California to work and support my household. I am a solo parent. I have a 9-year-old son. He was 2 at the time. And then flying back and campaigning in Baraboo and Wisconsin Dells. So I was campaigning all around the state, and boy, if that wasn't foreshadowing to what I am doing now. Because for those of you who are watching my social media, you see me all over this district, and it is 26 counties. It is just nonstop, 1/3 of the state. But it has been so wonderful. I am getting out, I am hearing the same things from people. People are excited for real representation. I am too. And people are asking me if I'm tired. I say, no, I'm not. Because I get out and I talk to people, and talking to voters really motivates me. It really energizes me even further with every stop. Well, anyway, I was talking about how I was elected to serve the Ho-Chunk Nation as Associate Justice on the Ho-Chunk Supreme Court. Actually, I didn't even get to that part. I was campaigning very hard. Well, spoiler alert, I did win. And the tribal elders say that I set a new standard of campaigning in the Ho-Chunk Nation. And then I was re-elected to that seat in 2017. Well, I made my way back to Wisconsin with my young son. We first lived in Wisconsin Dells in some of the Ho-Chunk lands called Indian Heights. And then made my way back up to Wausau. My grandpa, the dairy farmer that I referenced, was in his last years. And I said, you know, I'm never going to regret bringing my son home to Grandpa for that time. And it's true. He was called home just last year himself, and I will never regret getting those last few years with him. Well, when I returned home, my son was just about to start kindergarten. He's in 3rd grade now, but he was just about to start kindergarten. And, sorry, this mic is just going in and out. It's really frustrating. Maybe I should just get rid of it. Can you hear me without it?
Yeah.
It's distracting me. It's just, you know, sometimes we just have to say, that's not going to work. That is just going on. Check, check. Okay, I'm going to start from the beginning. No, just kidding. Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. This is much better, by the way. So anyway, my son, we returned home to Wausau, and my son was starting kindergarten. And I was reading some of the local publications, and I was so shocked to learn about the child poverty in this area. And that's how I connected or reconnected with some of you in this room, because we're all learning about the child poverty in this area. And specifically, one of the things that was alarming to me was the food insecurity that our children suffer. And so, in addition to reading, it was an article in the Wausau Pilot and Review. I went and I had meetings. I went to the United Way of Marathon County, and I tried to learn more. And I learned that we have students here in the Wausau School District that they get the free and reduced lunch, but that's all they know they're going to have. So they know they've got lunch at school on Friday, and they don't know where their next meal is going to come from until Monday morning. And I said, we can do better. That was heartbreaking to me to think about that, to think about my son's classmates potentially in that situation and not having somebody advocate for them. Around the same time, my congressperson at the time was holding a town hall. It was last minute. I don't even know how I learned about it because I was never on the list of friendlies, but I did go, and I asked him about this. I explained what I had learned and wanted to know what was happening at a federal level. And the response that I received was so disheartening, really just saying, yeah, it's really sad. Well, that was really upsetting to me because our children deserve better. And so I walked out of there and I said, oh, I'm gonna run against this guy. And I called the 7th CD chair at the time, and I talked to her, and there were actually 5 candidates that were putting their name in the hat, and I said, okay, you know, I'll step back on this one, maybe at some point. We'll see where that goes. And instead I decided I'll run for Wausau School Board because it's one thing, I didn't even mention that I went to the school board and advocated for them to do more. And it's one thing to go and be a vocal constituent, which I think is great. That's fantastic. But it's another thing to actually have a voice at the table and be a decision maker. So I campaigned very hard for that seat. Many of you know that. You saw my signs everywhere. You helped put them out. You dropped lit for me. I know a number of you have been so helpful. And I did prevail in that election. And now most of you, or some of you know, I am the current school board president for the Wausau School District. And I've worked very hard on different matters, whether it's making sure that we value our teachers for the professionals that they are, whether it's statewide efforts on matters of educational policy, ensuring student equity, specifically as it relates to retiring Native American mascots, logos, nicknames, symbols, and imagery in our school districts. Since I started that work, 3 of the 31 districts that still retain that interscholastic discriminatory practice actually made the choice to retire theirs. So that is thousands upon thousands of students that will be benefiting because of that. So that's some work, and then some local work that I've done. Some of you know that I've worked really hard on Indigenous Peoples Day recognition, first with Wausau City Council and the mayor, and then with Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. And then because I said on the news it'd be great to have a powwow back in Wausau, I had to form a nonprofit and do the fundraising and organizing, and a number of you came to that inaugural Central Wisconsin Indigenous Peoples Day powwow that was just last October. And we're hoping that that will be an annual event because it was so desperately needed, not just for the Native community, but for everybody in this community. So that brings me to where we are today and why I'm running. Well, there's so many reasons. We need real representation, right? We have so many things. We have a healthcare crisis here in this country. People need affordable, accessible healthcare. I know I'm going to be asked about that question, so I'm just going to bypass it until I get to that question to save time. But we also have a farm crisis. Our small and mid-sized farmers need real representation. They shouldn't be used as collateral in Trump's trade war. I've been at dairy farms, I've been at ginseng farms, and I have seen firsthand how people are having to decide whether or not they're going to be able to keep their farm open. We need to do a lot more to support them. We need to ensure access to competitive markets. We need to eliminate predatory business practices. We need to have funding for mental health assistance for our farmers. If you've been reading the news, you see that we have a suicide crisis for our farmers here in Wisconsin. And I think that's wrong. We need to be able to help them, not turn our backs on them. As the granddaughter of a dairy farmer, this is personal for me. We need to support our small businesses, because when we support our small businesses, we support our farmers. And we need to ensure broadband access for our farmers, for our schools, for our small businesses, for everybody. Because without it, it deprives people of opportunity. But I was seeing that firsthand in farms that I've been visiting. I'm also running because of the environment. This is something else that's going to be addressed, so I won't go into it in great detail, but we need to address this climate emergency with the urgency it requires. I am Ho-Chunk, and I'm not going to go through the removal story for you, but in a quick synopsis, my Ho-Chunk relatives were repeatedly removed from Wisconsin and kept coming back, even when we were taken over to South Dakota and down to Nebraska. And the reason we did is because we have a tradition that tells us it is our job, it is our duty to take care of this land. I have that running through my veins. So I take the environment very seriously and making sure that we have clean air, clean water, and our beautiful land stay protected from corporate greed for generations to come. We need to address campaign finance reform. This is just so critical because until we address campaign finance reform, we are not going to achieve a government that's reflective of society. You know, I'm sitting here and I'm making all these calls for donations, and my likely opponent has dark money just funneling in. And I appreciate each and every small dollar donation. I know the value of a hard-earned dollar. But what it does is it keeps out people that would be good representatives. When I'm elected to this seat, I'll be the first Native American to represent Wisconsin in Congress. That is an overdue representation. And when I'm elected to this seat, I will be the first woman ever to represent Wisconsin 7 in Congress. It is 2020. That is also an overdue representation. And people should not vote for me because I am a woman. They should vote for me because I'm a qualified woman who's going to get the job done. Women's issues are human issues, and it is high time that our young girls and our women see themselves reflected in congressional leadership. And I mentioned I'm a solo parent. I didn't even know this till after I was already running, but when I'm elected to this seat, I will double the population of current single parents in Congress. Does that sound like society to you? No. And it comes back to campaign finance reform. I don't accept corporate PAC money, right? I think that people, representatives, should be accountable to the voters and only the voters. And I believe we have to practice what we preach, but I don't accept corporate PAC money. The corporate, we have to overturn Citizens United and get that dark money out of funneling into our elections and filling those seats. I can tell that Joel wants to get onto the question, so I'm just going to wrap up here. I'm just going to wrap up and say, if you're ever wondering where Tricia Zucker is going to come out on something, and we didn't talk about it, you didn't read something about it, I can tell you I've got 3 guiding principles that form the basis for my decision making. Number 1, compassion. Is this the compassionate result? Number 2, equality. It doesn't matter what somebody looks like, who they love, or how they identify their gender. Does this legislation protect them equally? And finally, opportunity. Does this decision provide the most equitable and inclusive opportunity for people to have a chance at success? I've been given opportunities in my life. If you were to look at my life on paper, you probably wouldn't think I ended up where I did. I come from very humble beginnings. My parents were very young when I was born, and they did the best they could. But I've seen my mom pay for groceries with coins. One time during a snowstorm, she couldn't get her car out of the garage. Or, sorry, not the garage, the driveway. But we couldn't go one day without her wages. So she wrapped herself in a blanket and she walked 4 miles to work. That's how I grew up. But I had opportunities that I seized upon. And because of that, I feel an obligation and a duty to give back so that other people have an opportunity for success. I believe in public service. That's why I'm running. And thank you so much for allowing me this time.
All right, thank you. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Bruce Grau. He's a member of OWR, the Wausau chapter, and he's agreed to ask a question related to healthcare. So thank you, Bruce. Here you go. You can stand up.
It's a hard act to follow. I just have to ask a question. So I'm a member of our Wisconsin Revolution. I'm also a member of the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council. And I've been a nurse for 36 years, the last 26 of which as a nurse practitioner in geriatrics. So my question is concerning healthcare. The U.S. leads the pack in developed countries in spending on healthcare, yet its health outcomes fall far behind them. Costs continue to soar, expecting to exceed 20% of the GDP, whereas in 1970, it only accounted for 6.9%. Inability to pay medical bills is now cited in 62% of bankruptcies, and the number of uninsured Americans now reach 30 million. While CEO salaries for health insurance companies explode and exceed $342 million in 2017. So please define your stand on health care. How will your plan support and assure access to everyone, minimize the threat of bankruptcy, and prove the most effective plan compared to the others being proposed? Thank you.
All right, thank you for the question. Address that with some overarching principles. So first of all, nobody should die because they can't afford their medical care. That's wrong. People should not go bankrupt because they can't afford their prescription drugs. I believe that we need to ensure that we have affordable, accessible health care. We need to work to expand the ACA, and I support a robust public option for those that want it. We're hearing so much about Medicare for All from the Democratic presidential primary candidates, and I think that's great because that is the system we are moving to. But I am out talking to Wisconsin 7 voters that really like their private insurance. They really like it, and I'm talking not just to voters, I'm talking to union members that worked really hard to negotiate their health care plans. And if there's something that I believe is that people must be empowered in their decision-making. Healthcare is a very personal choice, and people must be empowered in making their health decisions. I will say that if I am talking in my fierce defense of a woman's right to bodily autonomy, or more generally as it relates to healthcare. Now, if it were to come to a vote on the floor, say Medicare for all, well, that is something I support, but at that time, we have actual legislation. I have time to come back to the voters. I have time to hold town halls with ample notice to everybody, not just the people that voted for me, because when I am elected to this seat, I'll represent everybody, and I'll be able to have those conversations with people. But right now, we are operating on such a condensed timeline that our voters are not there yet. And so that's part of this. But we also need to make sure that people with pre-existing conditions are covered. I've had a pre-existing condition myself half my life. And, you know, people should not be penalized for a pre-existing condition. What we really need to do is take on Big Pharma. I am ready to take on Big Pharma. I worked in intellectual property early in my legal career. And there's one thing I know. They are getting away with something that is darn near criminal. They are charging us here in America 10 times what they are charging in other countries for the exact same medication or drug. That is wrong. But why aren't people taking on Big Pharma? Because Big Pharma is funding the seats, right? Well, remember, I don't take corporate PAC money. And it's just plain wrong. There was just a bill that was signed by an Illinois governor, just I think within the last week, capping insulin costs at $100 a month. That is way too much. It seems like a real victory down there, but if people need something to stay alive, then we need to work to make sure that they can get it for free. But $100, that is a lot of money for somebody. So when we talk specifically about insulin, I have a friend that is 71 years old, and she can never stop working because of medical debt that she has accrued helping her son, her diabetic son, with his insulin costs. That is not the America that we should have. I want to remind everybody that my likely opponent will do everything he can to make it more expensive for people to get health care. He will not take on Big Pharma. More people will die. More people will go bankrupt as a result. And I know that there's some people in this room who want to hear maybe a bolder answer that Wisconsin 7 isn't ready for. And maybe that will impact your decision tonight on who to endorse. But I really think that you should be thinking long-term. Who is the candidate that can beat the Republican? And I hope that that guides your decision-making as well.
All right, thank you, Bruce and Tricia, for that. And now I'd like to introduce co-op member and leader of the Hmong Mutual Association and County Board Supervisor, Yilang Zhang.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe, for this opportunity, and thank you, Ms. Dunker, for your time. During the Vietnam War, tens of thousands of Hmong men and women fought in Southeast Asia, specifically in Laos, on behalf of the United States in a variety of roles, such as 1, disrupting the transportation of supplies from North Vietnam to South Vietnam along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, 2, rescuing U.S. pilots that were shot down, 3, protecting the United States radio towers. According to the Center of Hmong Studies, it is estimated that the Hmong people would lose about 30 Hmong lives for every Hmong pilot that was, for every United States pilot that was saved. Colonel Shong Lin Hyung, who fought during the Big Secret War, told a story that he lost 30 of his men, saving an American pilot that was shot down during the battle. Ultimately, in 1975, after the withdrawal of the United States forces, because of their role, the Hmong people faced persecution and were forced to attend re-education camps by the communist regime. Leaders like Pranyatubi Li Feng, who held a position equivalent to the U.S. Attorney General, was sent to a re-education camp where ultimately he was killed, and Major General Vinh Pao was forced to leave Laos. By the end of 1975, out of the 300,000 Hmong people who resided in Laos, that's about the same population of Hmong currently in the United States here. About 30,000 Hmong soldiers died fighting. The The death toll did not include 50,000 Hmong civilian deaths or the deaths lost during the Hmong's journey from Laos to Thailand in hopes of escaping persecution, or the Hmong's lives lost during the re-education camps. To give perspective, it is estimated that 25% of all the Hmong men and boys died fighting. It is estimated that 15,000 Hmong people made the decision to leave Laos, braving the jungle of Laos, and ultimately crossing the Mekong River into Thailand and eventually to the United States, where the first Hmong family arrived in the state of Wisconsin on April 9, 1976. This marked the ending of a chapter and the beginning of a new one for the Hmong community. This year, 2020, will mark the 45th anniversary of the Hmong diaspora. It is an important milestone in the Hmong community. Today, there are less than 1,000 Hmong veterans left and several thousands of former Hmong refugees in the state of Wisconsin, all of whom are suffering from PTSD, trauma, and many other mental and health illnesses. There have been numerous proclamations, resolutions, statutes, and memorials acknowledging the Hmong and Laotian veterans, but no actual benefits. If elected, what will you do to help our Hmong veterans and our former Hmong refugees? And will you support extending VA benefits to these veterans who fought to defend America before they became an American?
All right, thank you, Mr. Zhang, for that question. I grew up in this community, and I am so glad for the diversity that we have here, including the Hmong community that is here. I think it is just plain insulting that benefits have not been extended. I absolutely support extending all VA benefits and honors, including health care, admission to veterans' homes, admissions to veterans' cemeteries. And when I think about this issue, and thank you for addressing it, I am a constitutional law professor. I've been teaching for almost 13 years. And I think about this, I think there is a potential discrimination claim here, quite frankly. So not only do I support what you're asking, but I have to wonder if we might be dealing with an unconstitutional situation that hasn't been addressed and needs to be in a meaningful way. I also support mental health benefits to treat PTSD, funding grants to help out places like Gashia House in Madison, getting some more similar locations outside of Madison. But certainly, I support the Hmong community. I support our veterans.
Thank you very much for that question. All right, next we have the chair of the North Central Organizing Co-op's Steering Committee. That's Don Dunphy.
Justice Zunker, it's widely recognized that immigration is essential to our economy and that as a nation we need to secure our borders. What do you propose that would ensure that we have a steady stream of talented, hardworking immigrants while at the same time protecting us from malefactors who may want to come here to harm us?
All right, thank you for this question. I have been getting out, visiting farms, visiting small businesses, and I see the labor that is in these places, labor that other people don't want to do, and labor that needs to be done. And I'm glad that those individuals are here. I support our dreamers. I think that if somebody came here as a child and this is the only home they've ever known, it would be inhumane and cruel to deport them to some place that they've never known as their home. So I support them. I don't support funding for a border wall. I think that's a load of garbage, quite frankly. We need to prioritize where we spend our money, and that really is investing in our future, investing in our schools, our children, but it is not putting money in the border wall. So when we talk about how we're going to approach this, we have to talk about how we think about it as a whole. A public policy that seeks to end unauthorized immigration must understand the reason that it occurs in the first place. So enforcement plays a role in reducing unauthorized immigration, but there are other reasons that individuals are coming here. Economic need. Maybe they are fleeing persecution. reasons that, if you look at the founding of this country, we should be welcoming them. As an indigenous woman, I have a different perspective, right? My relatives have always been here. And I think that this country is more beautiful the more diverse that it is. I think that we need to have a process, though. We can't have chaos. We need to have a process for ensuring immigration and how we approach it. But when you talk about security threats, you know, we have these anti-immigrant pundits that are talking about security at our borders and doing horrific things, like separating children from families. In fact, I have a little story about that. That is so appalling to me, but that is happening. Separating children from their families. I know a little something about intergenerational historical trauma. And what we are doing to those children right now is unforgivable. It feels so helpless. And I, with a number of other women, formed a group in June 2018 called Lawyer Moms of America. And what we did is we looked at the legality of Trump's practices, separating innocent children from their families at the border. And we drafted a letter, which I'm happy to share with anybody upon request. My email is on my website, www.trishaforwisconsin.com. And then within our group, everybody was assigned to deliver the letter to their congressional representative. So can you guess who delivered the letter to Representative Duffy? That was me. I didn't get a meaningful response. I did get a letter about 6 weeks later. It said nothing about the issue, and it was just really disappointing. So that is something that I've come out very strongly against. But when we talk about national security and security at the border, it's not people fleeing persecution. It's not people that are risking their lives for a better life because what they are leaving is so horrific we can't even imagine it. That's not the security threat. The security threat is cybersecurity. And that's what we need to address. And we can look at how that has affected us as a national security threat because of the effect on the 2016 elections. That's our national security threat.
Next, we have co-op member and International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers member, Jeff Starr.
I don't think I need that.
Okay.
Hi, I am a proud member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 388, and my question is going to be on right to work. As union membership declines, so do the wages for all workers. You can't complain about stagnant wages without strengthening unions. Wisconsin and many other states have passed many anti-worker laws. Labor unions have fought for workers and built the middle class. Now corporate interests are investing in politicians that are rolling back workers' rights. One of these many efforts is to keep wages and benefits low, is the National Right to Work legislation. This could cripple organized labor. Unions would have to represent and vigorously defend workers even if they do not pay dues. These workers enjoy all the benefits of union membership without any contributions. Would you oppose these efforts if elected? And what other measures would you take to strengthen workers' rights?
All right, thank you, Mr. Starr. All right, so I absolutely oppose any right-to-work legislation. I grew up in a strong union household, and I know firsthand how important unions are. And it's sad to see in society how much people don't really respect the work of unions. I also see this in my capacity as school board president. You know, when we have a decision to make that affects the teachers, affects the staff, I go to the teachers union president, I go to the teachers union leadership, and I say, how would this affect you? Can I get your take on this? And some of the conversations I've had is, you know, even for people that aren't part of the union, they still benefit from the work of unions. They don't recognize that. I mentioned I was on the picket lines with my mom as a child. Not just as a child. I'm actually a union member myself. I don't share this in all venues, but I think you know that, Mr. Starr. I've been a union member since 2006. And I was on the picket lines in 2007 in Los Angeles in solidarity for the writers' union strike of 2007. So I practice what I preach. And in fact, I wouldn't be a passive supporter of labor. I would be out on the picket lines. Absolutely. We also need to pass the Employee Free Choice Act to make it easier for workers to join unions. And I think that we need to make sure that we strengthen protections generally. Making sure that, whistleblower protections, ensuring discrimination laws are upheld, ensuring that Social Security remains protected, supporting paid family and medical leave. All of those things do help our union workers as well. So, thank you for the question.
All right, next we have Rita Packel. She's with the Women for Women, and she's also a co-op member.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Tricia, for coming and speaking with us. Anyway, I'm also a committee member of Women for Women Wausau, and we know how, our committee knows how important our environment is. So do you support the Green New Deal? More specifically, what can we do to hold polluters and government more accountable to the environment and the taxpayers, while providing incentives to consumers, businesses, and governments to use more renewable energy and reduce their carbon footprint?
All right, thank you for that question. There's lots of components to that question, so let me make sure I address each of them. First of all, supporting the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is a set of principles, of which I all agree. But it's not legislative text. So it's hard to say, yes, I support the principles, absolutely, but we need to have legislation that can be debated on the floor. And I think what it's also important to remember is that the environment pervades everything else we do. So we can have components that address the environment, that address this climate emergency we are living in other legislation. It doesn't have to be just specific about the environment. So when I talk about support for our small and mid-sized farmers, for instance, we can have incentives for sustainable renewable energy as part of that legislation. Speaking of farmers and speaking of pollution, one problem that we see and that I really see in all my visits to the western part of the district is big ag and holding them accountable for their pollution. And what I'm seeing and hearing is that we need stricter regulations. People are feeling like this is a situation of the toothpaste is out of the tube and we can't fix this, but we can. We can with regulations that are stricter and that we actually enforce. Do you know that in big ag, the way that enforcement works is through self-reporting? Well, that's a problem. We need to change that immediately. And they're not going to like that, but again, they're not contributing to my campaign. You know, everything that we're talking about here really goes back to campaign finance reform. Mr. Starr asked a question I didn't really get to touch on because I talked about it earlier on, but even this too, you know, big ag buying seats, big pharma buying seats. Everything goes back to campaign finance reform, overturning Citizens United, having our elected leaders accountable to the people and only the people. And when we do that, this country is going to be on the right trajectory. So that was a bit of a tangent, but all right, so that's part of it. How do we hold regulations? Another thing, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. I don't know if anybody in here is familiar with that, but that is really a good example of something that gets us moving in the right direction. And that's something that I support. I think it's HR, I can't remember the number now. There's so, you have to learn so many numbers. I want to say it's like 763. And this is a really good start. You know, pricing carbon won't be sufficient by itself to deal with this climate crisis, this climate emergency, but it's an indispensable part of the solution. And that's what happens with this proposed bill. It would be a tremendous step forward. It engages all of us, something that we really need to do through our pocketbook decisions in addressing the problems of with the environment and giving us this opportunity to make necessary adjustments in our decisions. And it's important to note that with that proposed bill, most low and moderate income households would likely come out ahead financially because they have a lower than average carbon footprint. We also need to get back into the Paris Climate Agreement and just overall increase incentives for renewable energy production. I can assure you, if it wasn't conveyed enough in my introduction, the environment is very important to me. As an Indigenous woman, I feel a moral obligation when it comes to the environment. I mean, I really feel that in a lot of things, but because of our Ho-Chunk tradition, I know that we have to have clean air, clean water, and protect our lands. And my likely opponent will be supported by mining interests, which I don't support at all. And for those of you that came to the announcement at Eau Claire Dells, you know, the reason I did that was twofold. Number one, I had mentioned I didn't grow up with a lot of money in my family, but that's a place that we went to because it was free. We have those families today still all around us, even more so. We can't take that away from them, from us, from all of us. But also it was to send a message. I support the environment. I will be a staunch advocate for the environment. So I guess that's the rest of my answer, Mrs. Malko.
Thank you very much, and we're doing great on time. We've got time for a couple extras. This one's very popular based on the 2018 elections in our area. There were efforts all over the state to get referendums put on the ballot asking the voters how they felt about legalizing marijuana or ending the federal ban or legalizing medical marijuana. In Marathon County, over 60% of the voters tended to vote Republican, yet 70% of the voters said yes, we would support medical marijuana in the area. So that is what led to this next question. Tricia, if elected, would you support ending the federal ban on marijuana?
All right, so there's two components to that question. We're talking about medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. And just the short answer to both is yes. So as it relates to medical marijuana, if somebody is suffering, and we can reduce their suffering from their medical situation, or perhaps they have to take medication for their medical situation, and that medication gives them side effects that marijuana can reduce. But why wouldn't we allow that? It's inhumane, it's wrong, and I'm sure we can just track it back to, you know, corporate greed and big pharma and all of that. But I absolutely support medical marijuana because that is the compassionate choice. That's simple. And then recreational marijuana. Okay, so I did some research when I was in law school on prisoner sexual violence behind bars. It's a human rights piece on prisoner sexual violence behind bars. And I graduated law school in 2006, and I didn't finish that research because it was so horrible. It was horrible what I was learning, the statistics, the numbers, to find out the amount of non-violent drug offenders that are being assaulted in our prisons and our jails, and people are looking the other way. A society can be judged on how it treats its inmates, and we as a society are failing. And I say, give those non-violent drug offenders a future, not a record. There is no reason that we need to be criminalizing marijuana. It is such a distraction. We need criminal justice reform in the sense that let's focus on the real issues. Let's focus on the opioid crisis that's killing people at alarming rates. Let's focus on domestic violence, gun violence. You know, our kids are having to, my son included, do these active shooter drills. I made it my entire academic career, which was pretty long, never having to do one. My son is in 3rd grade and he's done 7. What are we telling our kids? In case somebody comes in with a gun to kill you or your teacher, you need to do this.
No. Let's address the real problems. And when we talk about criminal justice reform, we also need to address the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis. So, marijuana is a distraction. And also, it's an opportunity. Remember I said compassion, equality, opportunity? Those are my guiding principles. What an amazing amount of revenue we are just throwing away that we could have by taxing marijuana.
Based on the applause, it's probably good that we got to that question. And we are doing very good on time. I would like to ask one last question of Tricia that will probably be a yes or no answer, and then give her the mic for a quick closing. But would you support anything that is brought forward at the federal level to stop partisan gerrymandering?
Yes, politicians should not be able to pick their voters. All right, well, I want to thank everybody. I appreciate your time tonight. I know you're going to listen to another candidate, and I just want to urge you in making your decision tonight, which is going to be the basis of whether or not I'm endorsed. Please think long-term, because we need to think about who can win this race on May 12th. I can win this race, but only with you. Only with the support of each and every one of you. Together, we can win this race. Because yes, it says Tricia Zunker on the ballot, but what's really on the ballot? Affordable, accessible health care. Drastically lowering the cost of prescription drugs. The farm crisis. Campaign finance reform. The environment. Addressing this climate emergency with the urgency it requires. Properly funding our public schools and investing in our future, our children. I know there's so much, right? I could go on and on. That's what's on the ballot. And I just want you to know that it's not just about how somebody's going to vote. But when you elect somebody to Congress, you have to think about how effective they're going to be. And one thing I'm very good at is going to develop those personal relationships that you need to do. I am fully prepared to work across the aisle to achieve bipartisan solutions that are going to make life better for people here in Wisconsin. And that's what we need. When I was first elected to school board, the very first thing I did was reach out to each and every school board member and ask if they had time for coffee or a meeting so that I could have a one-on-one, just on a human level. And every single person said yes. And that is how I approach working with people, working across the aisle, even though that's nonpartisan. You kind of know where people are, right? And I work very well with people that are politically opposite sides of the spectrum. And I am prepared to do that from Congress. For those of you that know me, which is lots of you in here, you know I am nothing if I'm not effective. And so I am prepared to work hard for you in Congress. I just ask that you work hard with me now. This is a group effort. I am not optimistic, or I'm not optimistic. I am not pessimistic that people say it's such a gerrymandered district. Oh no. We are going to reclaim this district, but it's going to be with your help. So May 12th is big. We need to get the voters to come out. If everybody in this room calls 10 people, tells them to get out, vote Zunker on May 12th, and they call people, we can make a difference of thousands and thousands of votes. So thank you so much for your time. I'm deeply honored, deeply humbled, and please feel free to reach out to me. I apologize that I won't be able to stay. I'm on a grading deadline. I've got to get my grades out. Thank you very much.
And with that, I am going to, if Lawrence is ready, I'm ready to turn the microphone over to him.
All right.
I think he's going to follow a similar format. He's going to give an introduction. He's going to go right into the questions and then give exiting speech. So here we go.
Oh, I got it. Okay. This one doesn't work, obviously. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? No?
Keep it right up to your mouth. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm Lawrence Dale, and I'm on the ballot, and I'm looking forward to helping this election along. A little bit about myself. I'm from Vilas County. I've been living up there since 2006. I moved down and worked for the radio station. But Anyway, in 2016, I was a Sanders delegate from Vilas County. And basically, well, after that, I did run for the 34th Assembly District. But I'm a Vietnam veteran. I used the GI Bill of Rights to get my education. And I did my undergraduate work at Ohio University, majored in government, then went to the University of Oregon, majored in industrial and labor relations, got inspired by the labor movement. And I worked for several years as a field organizer. And what else did we do? We did a lot of work regarding collective bargaining. I've been through that. Anyway, my whole professional career is involved with the labor movement. And eventually I decided just to get out of it. I was being pushed around, not pushed around, but actually had to move around the country quite a bit. And it gets old, and you don't have, I think if you're going to be in the movement, you should be in a community where you're working with people, you're working with the other organizations, you're advocating for the membership on a local level. So when you're moving constantly, it takes away your credibility. People don't know you. You're basically a hired gun, so to speak, hatchet man, some people say. I just didn't think it was working. So, and furthermore, I never had any time to do a small business venture. So, you know what happens to people, they get involved with their careers and what they want to do and their education, and they got to serve in the military and have all that going on. So finally, you decide you got to do something for yourself, and that's what I did. So I went for many years working for myself, having my own business. I'm an insurance agent, and I guess what got me really going was in 2014, we had the mining bill. And that was so outrageous. Ohio University, one of the first organizations I joined as a student, was the Ecology Club. And what this Ecology Club would do is they'd go around showing the slides about strip mining. So when they were talking about the mining bill here being environmentally clean, and by the way, the mining bill was spearheaded by Tom Tiffany. There is no such thing as a strip mining operation that is environmentally clean. And what that bill called for, and again, I hope you all understand, Tom Tiffany is the one that's going to be on the ballot. He's got a lot of baggage. And I was going to save this for last, but I may as well tell you now. I think that we really have to expose Tom Tiffany for what he is. He came into, he's there, he swore an oath to represent the interests of the people. And what we see happening instead is he's bringing this multinational, multi-billion-dollar mining operation and letting them write the bill and introducing that bill into the Assembly and into the Senate, ultimately signed by the governor, that called for strip mining, an area that goes from Mercer and Iron County all the way up 90 miles long to Douglas County, taking away all the old growth forest and then turning up the soil to expose the iron ore to sunlight, rainfall, snow melt. That creates sulfuric acid. That's an environmentally clean mining operation. And they sold it on the basis of jobs. But how many jobs are going to be destroyed? You know, how many people that own lodges, residences, businesses, farms, when that sulfuric acid leaches into your groundwater, you don't have property values anymore. You don't have a business anymore. And I see the same thing happening 5 years later. And it's crazy because I thought I would run a campaign that was nonpartisan, that would attract the Democrats, I guess you'd call it the inherent Democrats, you know, the farmers and the people who have knowledge about the FDR era when we got the Social Security Act passed. How many people depend upon the Social Security system today? I mean, it's still a legacy that we have to hold dear and remind people of when we're organizing and getting them out to vote. And what about the Works Progress Administration? It took the federal government back then to put Americans to work because the rich had expropriated so much of the wealth that it caused that great collapse of the stock market in 1929. And we were headed towards fascism, just like Europe was. And there's so much, you know, that parallels that we see today with the way the multi-billionaires that are part of the big oil, part of big, all the big industries, big banking. Why are they headed towards that authoritarian rule? There's so many parallels, and this is why this election is so important. We have to look at the dairy industry, for example. I was just talking to a couple of folks about that before I came up here. It is not economic forces that are driving dairy farmers off their land. Not that at all. In a sense it is, because if you call the manipulation of markets to create an oversupply of raw milk, if you consider that a market force, I don't think most people think of that. They don't think that their own state government and state Republican leadership would do something like that to the very people who largely vote Republican. But they eat their own. And I think that is the most critical thing we can do to win this election and turn it from red to blue, is to show our solidarity with the small farming community, with the small dairy farming operations. We've lost 7,000 farms, small dairy farms, since 2004. And just to give you an example of how that market is manipulated, because the fact that it was the oversupply of milk, you know, not the fact that that small dairy farms are inefficient. They're very efficient. They're very environmentally sustainable. They've been providing quality products, for 150 years, or just about that long anyway. But in 2012, Scott Walker introduced an initiative called Grow Wisconsin Dairy. It called for increasing the supply of milk, making these farms, giving them incentives to produce more milk at a time when thousands of small dairy farm operations were going out of business due to oversupply. And I think everybody has a copy of the leaflet I handed out that says vote February 18th right in the middle. Okay? The citation there is a recent investigative report done by the Milwaukee Journal, and it was funded by the Pulitzer Center for Investigative Reporting. And that's what they came up. I mean, I don't make this stuff up. This is, I'm just trying to extrapolate from what I saw in that report. My focus when I was in graduate school at the University of Oregon was economics. And so I guess I'm sensitive to this because, you know, we saw this earlier in 2014 with the mining bill. They're going after the multi-billion-dollar tourist economy, and then 5 years later we see them going after our $43 billion a year small dairy farm part of our economy. How many small businesses can we afford to lose? We can't afford really to lose any. We are in the doldrums up here in our economy. These small dairy farms are not small in terms of assets. These are multi-million-dollar enterprises that are being driven out of business for no good reason, and it's the corruption of the Republican leadership in Madison that has created these conditions. Now, what are they substituting these small family dairy farms with? They're bringing in and greasing the skids to bring in the industrial dairy farms, where you have 5,000 to 7,000 cows on one farm. Now, what happens, and what is the problem that we're seeing with them today? So much environmental damage. One farm with 6,000 cows creates as much manure as 240,000 residents of Madison, Wisconsin. And that's no lie. That's all part of this report. So that's on a daily basis. That's not like every 6 months. 17 gallons of manure and urine per day per animal. Now, the other thing, I dug a little deeper into this, and I saw that, not in the manure, but, but it really is a lot of BS, I'll tell you. But there was a report done by the Johns Hopkins Center for Public Health, and they said, and I think it's topical to look at that report. It was done in 2011, and they said back then that there's a danger of these, not only environmental dangers, because when you have those numbers, on our sandy, porous soils, what that does is it leaches right through to your groundwater. And it's just a horrible mess. They have 16 of these industrial dairy farms in Kewaunee County alone. And I don't know if y'all remember, but I remember reading back when they were, getting rid of the DNR scientists and all that kind of thing. And so who is offsetting the costs of these huge industrial dairies? The taxpayer. They're going, right now, Tony Evers is wanting $1 million for his clean water program to clean up the manure mess that these giant industrial dairies are creating. So I could go on about this a while longer, but I think what we need to know is that we have to show solidarity with these small family dairy operations. I believe we only have about 7,500 of them left. And if they get rid of them, we are already having these industrial dairies knocking at our door. In Wood County, they've already put in a building permit down there, and the Supreme Court of Wisconsin has okayed it by saying that the city of Saratoga has to accept that building permit. We don't have home rule. We don't have the ability to have a referendum. They know none of us would ever vote to have one of those things in our yard, or close to our yard. And that's where, I don't know where y'all live, but they have the right to put it right next door to you without talking to any of your community leaders. And I think this is a health hazard. This is created by a political organization that calls itself the leadership. They're corrupt because they know that they can't get very much money from the average small dairy farmer who only on average makes $45,000 a year net. They like these big giant industrial dairies. That's where the money is. And you see us sliding that way, where they're going to take over all the dairy processing and leave the more efficient, more environmentally sustainable, greener small family dairy farms. They're going to sweep them aside. I think this is a critical time in our district's history, and I want to say that I think I'm the candidate to take that battle to Tom Tiffany and to the Republican leadership. They're corrupt, they're destroying our state, and they're already knocking on the door of the 7th. We already have a suspended operation up in Bayfield County with a swine operation going on there. But I want to just say one more thing, and then I'll should have had a bell. 2 minutes, okay? But the health thing is very important to understand. Not only did Johns Hopkins warn us about the danger of this, but what they, to go on with that, what they meant to say and what they did say is the fact that we are all familiar with the coronavirus, right? That's going on now. Viruses jump from animals to humans, especially when they're all, when you have, 6,000 or 7,000 of them all together. We have to be leery of that. In another study done by the National Health Organization, they recommended back in 2011 that there should, after the review of about 40 studies, they found that and recommended that there should be a moratorium on the expansion of these. How many small dairy farm operations have we already left? Why isn't there any concern about the health implications on the part of our would-be Republican leadership? Tom Tiffany is spearheading their whole campaign to bring this in, and I think we certainly have to have a candidate that will take that battle to them. I speak on this every time PBS and all the other community access stations. This is always brought up, and we have to hammer at this. We have to show solidarity with the small dairy farm operations and show that, and I'm telling them this. My campaign, if you're a Republican, vote for Lawrence Dale. If you're against any more of these industrial dairies coming into the state, or more specifically into our district, vote for Lawrence Dale. And if you're an independent, the same thing. I think this is the kind of message that has appeal across party lines. I've done business up in this area for many years, and the thing is, I never ask people if they're Republican or if they're an independent, or what their religion is. We try to help each other. I can do something for you that'll help your business, so you can do business with me. And that's the way it should be. We have to help each other, but I'll open it up now to the man here.
Thank you. We have to share a microphone. Unfortunately, the cord was cutting off. I'm going to bring it over here and have them ask the question and then bring you the mic. Okay?
All right.
I'm just going to let you introduce yourself. You did a great job.
I'm Bruce Grau. I'm a member of our Wisconsin Revolution.
Hey, Bruce.
Hello. I'm a nurse, and my question deals with healthcare.
Okay.
So the U.S. leads the pack in developed countries in spending in healthcare, yet its health outcomes lag far behind them. Costs continue to soar, expecting to exceed 20% of the GDP. And looking back in 1970, it only accounted for 6.9%.
Right.
As do the numbers of uninsured Americans, now reaching over 30 million, and that doesn't include the underinsured. Inability to pay medical bills is now cited in 62% of all bankruptcies in this country, while CEO salaries for health insurance companies explode, exceeding $342 million in 2017. Please define your stand on health care. How will the plan you support assure access to everyone, minimize the threat of bankruptcy, and prove the most effective plan compared to other plans being talked about?
Okay. Thank you. Well, I've always been for universal health care coverage, and I'm proud to say that I support Bernie Sanders, and I support Medicare for all. And yeah, 500,000 bankruptcies every year for people just getting sick. I mean, come on. And yet these healthcare providers, these giant insurance companies making all these profits, this is, is untenable. We have roughly 40,000 people dying every year because they put off going to see a doctor, and then they get so sick that nothing can help them. But yet it's very much more expensive to treat. So that is something that I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't believe that we should put our finger up in the air and see which way the wind blows. We have been patching up this healthcare system of ours. I'm an insurance agent. I see a lot of it from the inside. But what I like about the Medicare for All is it gives the government an opportunity to negotiate lower prices for prescription drugs. And also, and that's an important thing. Can you imagine, well, like Tricia said earlier, saving all that money, probably 90% on diabetic drugs alone. People go to Canada to get 90% off from what they have to spend here. And that's true right down the line for all the prescription drugs. The added benefits of Medicare for All are a lot of times overlooked. Long-term care, have any of you ever tried to buy long-term care insurance? Once you're over 50 years old, man, I actually trained to sell long-term care. It's too expensive. I just gave it up. It's just not affordable. And then they have the right to change the terms of the agreement. It's awful. Yeah. And the same with Advantage. All these companies that sell insurance, they're pushing these Medicare Advantage plans. What a rip! Holy cow! I would tell you, if you're going to buy a health care plan for Medicare, get a Medicare sub-plan. At least you can go anywhere in the United States and its territories, and you don't have to worry about whether you're in the right service area. But that's exactly the point of these Advantage plans. That way, they know as we get older, we're not as on top of things. Okay, so they take advantage of that. That's part of their profit. That's part of the profit thing, and they depend upon that. And as an agent, I could get $530 selling one Medicare Advantage plan, but a Medicare sub-plan, I get maybe $250, as for selling it, and then I get a little residual as an insurance agent. They all do. But yeah, the more the company can make off of a plan in any insurance product, the more that they're going to give the agent in terms of commission. So that's that's how you can judge it. But as far as Medicare for All, it will also add vision, dental, and once that happens, once we do get Medicare for all, it shows that, Medicare or medical services, healthcare services are to be a right, no longer a privilege. So that's why we have to move to Medicare for all.
Thank you. My name is Yiling Zhang. I'm the Executive Director of the Hmong American Center. And my question is, during the Vietnam War, tens of thousands of Hmong men and women fought in Southeast Asia, specifically in Laos, on behalf of the United States in a variety of roles, such as 1, disrupting the transportation of supplies from North Vietnam to South Vietnam along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, 2, rescuing U.S. pilots that were shot down, 3, protecting the United States radio towers. According to the Center of Hmong Studies, it is estimated that the Hmong people would lose about 30 Hmong lives for every United States pilot that was saved. Colonel Sholin Hyung, who fought during the Secret War, told a story that he lost 30 of his men saving an American pilot that was shot down during battle. Ultimately, in 1975, after the withdrawal of the United States forces, because of their role, the Hmong people faced persecution and were forced to attend re-education camps by the communist regime. Leaders like Panyadu Bilipong, who held a position equivalent to the U.S. Attorney General, was sent to a re-education camp where ultimately he was killed, and Major General Wang Pao was forced to leave Laos. By the end of 1975, out of the 300,000 Hmong people who lived in Laos, that's about the same population of the Hmong currently living in the United States. About 30,000 Hmong soldiers died fighting. This death toll did not include the 50,000 Hmong civilian deaths or the deaths lost during the Hmong's journey from Laos to Thailand in hopes of escaping persecution, or the Hmong lives lost attending the re-education camps. To give perspective, it is estimated that 25% of all the Hmong men and boys died fighting in this war. It is estimated that an additional 15,000 Hmong people made the decision to leave Laos, braving the jungle of Laos, and ultimately crossing the Mekong River into Thailand and eventually to the United States, where the first Hmong family arrived in the state of Wisconsin on April 9, 1976. This marked the ending of a chapter and the beginning of a new one for the Hmong community. This year, 2020, will mark the 45th anniversary of the Hmong diaspora. It is an important milestone in the Hmong community. Today, there are less than 1,000 Hmong veterans left, and several thousands of former Hmong refugees in the state of Wisconsin, all of whom are suffering from PTSD, trauma, and many other mental and health illnesses. There has been numerous proclamations, resolutions, statutes, and memorials acknowledging Hmong and Laotian veterans, but no actual benefits. If elected, what will you do to help our Hmong veterans and our former Hmong refugees? And will you support extending VA benefits to those veterans who fought to defend America before they became American?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The allies are important, and of course, if you're serving America as an ally, and then you're forced out of your country, obviously, because enemy forces took over, it only makes sense that you should get the same kind of compensation, certainly in health care, as anyone else. And so I would definitely support treating the Hmong people who served our country in that manner, the dignity of at least looking after their health. Certainly PTSD, it's such a rampant thing among soldiers who serve in that kind of environment, especially guerrilla war. Any kind of war can do it to you. I was an artilleryman in Vietnam for a year, and luckily I didn't have nearly the kinds of struggles that a lot of our soldiers went through, and certainly what the Hmong people went through. And so I know that Americans are very grateful for what the Hmong soldiers did to help in the rescue and other activities that kept the American soldiers there safe. And of course, we should indeed, and hopefully getting this Medicare for all passed will will also remedy that situation for you. At least that, you know, with that you can choose your own doctor. You don't, like in my case, I have to go all the way, you know, over an hour and a half just to see a real doctor. I mean, they have doctors that are physician assistants, I guess they call them. And that's what you see in the clinics. So, yeah. Well, and thank your Hmong veterans for their service. And I guess that's, thanks again.
Mr. Dale, my name is Don Dunphy, and I'm a member of the Citizens Action of Wisconsin. My question for you has to do with immigration. It is widely recognized that immigration is essential to our economic well-being, and that as a nation we need secure borders. What do you propose to ensure that we have a steady stream of talented, hardworking immigrants while at the same time protecting us from malefactors who may want to come here to do us harm?
Well, when I think of immigrants, I also like to distinguish between immigrants and refugees. And I think what the refugees need is a helping hand. And I think we need to be more observant of our, I think we're going, there we go. I think we need to be more observant about our policies towards certainly Central America and Mexico. For example, one of the driving forces would be our ag policy. We subsidize the commodity crop growers in this country. They get the lion's share, in fact, of all the Farm Bill's resources in terms of allocations. And when they dump corn on a place like Mexico and throw 1 million Mexicans off the land and their families, that tells you the root of one of the issues, and that would be the economic, wanting to get into the United States for economic reasons. If we impoverish them, take away their livelihoods by dumping subsidized corn on that market, well, we're creating problems for ourselves. But you don't hear that criticism very often in the news. It's always, well, you know, the way the Trump administration is, so racist, and actually looking, I think, for the people with brown skin or any other pigmentation that isn't Caucasian, is for that element that is now in control of the White House, part of their overall policy of dividing and conquering us. But I don't know. The other part, yeah, we don't want to see these children being separated from their parents, and I don't think that all of them have been returned. I think there's a lot of kids out there that are still, they don't know where their parents are. They don't know how to get a hold of them. So that whole policy certainly needs to be addressed. But I think that, you know, the economic refugees and the ones that are fleeing the terrorism that is going on in their own countries in Central America and Mexico. Well, I believe we got to, well, look at all the journalists that are being assassinated in Mexico. You say anything bad about one of their, you know, cartel leaders, or maybe it's just a grudge, but it's a fairly lawless place. I would never advise anybody to go vacation there anymore. And I've held that position for many years. But yeah, I don't know if I've thoroughly answered your question or not, but it's a very complex thing when you have an administration that has really no respect for people that from Latin America whatsoever, and I think that is reflected in the policy. We're not seeing the kind of influx we did years ago. So I would say that if we recognize the economic aspects of the Mexican economy, for one thing, we could certainly eliminate a lot of the stress on the border for people wanting to get into the United States. And if we also recognize lawlessness and the lack of democracy in Honduras and El Salvador and a lot of those other countries. And we started setting benchmarks for them. That is, free elections, monitored elections, so that the people's voices are really heard. And also start putting sanctions against these Central American leaders who are exercising fraud and undemocratic elections there. Anyway, it's a mess. I think that big business is too involved. We have to be more sensitive to the people of the region in terms of them having real democracy, withholding aid, especially military aid, against governments who don't give people free elections there. So I think that would help a lot.
Okay, thank you for coming, Bill.
Thank you.
Lawrence, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
First names are wonderful.
Don't call me late to dinner.
That's right. Okay, as a committee member of Women for Women in Wausau, our committee knows how important the environment is for us. So, do you support the Green New Deal? More specifically, what can we do to hold polluters and government more accountable to the environment and the taxpayers, while providing incentives to consumers, businesses, and governments to use more renewable energy and reduce their carbon footprints?
Okay. I don't know if all of you heard about this, but Germany is now 80% renewable. And I believe they're in a higher latitude than we are here. So they're really accessing that wind renewable, they're accessing that solar. And soon they will be totally a model for the world. We have to go to that. Now the climate deniers, they're taking too many positions of authority. We're looking at the even some of the Democrats in the past have supported like measures that exempt fracking from EPA oversight, and that releases so much methane, and it releases more methane than these manure lagoons. There's a joke going around that someday Wisconsin's going to be the land of 10,000 lagoons. And that's not funny, though, 10,000 lakes in Minnesota, 10,000 lagoons here in Wisconsin, and no family farm, which are very, very efficient in terms of leaving that footprint. These lagoons emit a lot of methane, and I'm talking maybe 26 times what you would, it's 26 times greater than a similar unit of CO2. So the Republican leadership policy is to create more of these. They don't believe in climate. They don't believe climate change is a factor, that it's just a natural geologic cycle that we go through. Certainly nothing in science proves that. So if you go to my website, it's Dale 2020, well, you all have it right there on your leaflets. My website is a work in progress, so I do have somebody working on it to make it more presentable and better and all that, but you'll get the gist of it. My first plank was what I talked about earlier. We have to put a moratorium on these concentrated animal feeding operations. That would do a lot right there to stop all that methane from heating up our world and making it basically uninhabitable. I mean, that's the outcome. And yet we still are paying massive subsidies to these oil companies to continue exploring for oil. I'm talking billions is going into that project, and it's killing our planet. It's eliminating species that it just pisses me off so much, because I want to see those species, but they're gone. So much of what I wanted to do years ago, I wanted to retire to the Gulf Coast, but I wouldn't want to swim in those waters. That oil is still coming out of those wells at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico there. The cancer rates are escalating, and it's not just from pesticides and herbicides, and which is happening a lot. A lot of these horrible chemicals are, as we know. I remember last summer, I was thinking, you know, here I am out in the country. Where are the honeybees? I mean, I probably saw last summer, and I go for these walks on, you know, places where, you know, there's a lot of growth of just various, you know, wildflowers and grasses and so on. But, you know, the clover, you usually see honeybees, you know, going from one to another. I think I saw maybe 3 or 4 honeybees last summer. I know it may vary from place to place, but I think this whole Monsanto Bayer thing is having an impact. We now have cancer rates that are astronomical. And they say, well, you know, it's because genetics. I mean, we have to look more into genetics. And maybe, you know, if we spent more research money on genetics, we would find a cure for cancer. Give me a break. Let's quit putting all that insecticide and herbicide and fungicide and all that crap into the food chain and quit killing all these ecosystems out there. I mean, it's just pathetic. And industrial farming, big corporate farming doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And I just hope they saved up enough of those heritage seeds that we can begin at a future date, because they just have to keep making it stronger and stronger in terms of keeping away the predators that eat the crops. So, and who eats the crops? And why are we all, you know, I bet everybody here knows somebody that's got cancer. It seems like every other person, I think it's 50% of males in this country are projected to have cancer at some point in their life. And what happens to your pets? They're kind of like the canary in the coal mine, and once that canary drops over, you know. But all the pets now are dying from cancer. Their noses to the ground all the time, and it's just a bad situation. Anyway, next one, please.
Hi, I'm Jeff Starr. I'm a proud member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 388. And my question is about right to work. As union membership declines, so do wages for all workers. You can't complain about stagnant wages without strengthening unions. Wisconsin and many other states have passed anti-worker laws. Labor unions have fought for workers' rights and have built the middle class. Now corporate interests have invested in politicians that are rolling back workers' rights. One of their many efforts is to keep wages and benefits low is national right to work legislation. This could cripple organized labor. Unions would need to represent and vigorously defend workers even if they do not pay dues. These workers enjoy all the benefits of union membership without any contributions. Would you oppose these efforts if elected, and what other measures would you take to strengthen worker rights?
Yeah, well, I oppose these measures now. I don't have to wait till I get elected. But for sure, I've been a union man going way back. That's why I went to the University of Oregon's graduate program in industrial and labor relations, is because I wanted to contribute to organized labor. I wanted to, what we'd call them when we'd organize the places, we would call them liberating that nursing home or liberating that work group. That's where we came from, because we knew those people were so oppressed. Their wages weren't keeping up with inflation. Management could harass them into, quitting, or just fire them for no reason. It was always an honor, really, when I represented individuals at the unemployment compensation hearing, showing that these folks were fired without good reason. And yet, management was serious about getting rid of them. But the right to work laws are simply a way to break up the solidarity of people who at work and in general. And we see this thing going on now with the Trump administration, calling Mexicans rapists and black people. I don't know, it just goes on and on. I'm sick of hearing the support of white supremacy, but I think all this kind of ties in overall. We need unions, but I don't know. We have to go back a ways and understand that in 1960, for example, 1 out of every 4 jobs was in manufacturing. And what has literally took the voice of organized labor out of the discussion. I remember back when there used to be a page in your newspaper would be about labor. You know, we have no influence anymore because so much of what has happened, and it's legal to happen, and it's still going on. And what that is that these investor capital groups like Bain Capital, the one I think Mitt Romney headed, their whole objective is to find a company in our community and just think of any company that you have now. Maybe they employ, I don't know, maybe 200 or 300 employees. It could be that small. But what's happening is they will come in and, you know, buy up that stock, take over that company, throw those workers out, you know, from these good-paying jobs, and then move this operation to Mexico where they can cut their labor costs by 70–80%, make their profit that way, and leave our communities high and dry, leaves the taxpayers paying for a lot of services that we would never, you know, have to do. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Lawrence.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, and so now we move to the next one, and I was corrected actually by Marathon County Board Supervisor Donna Krause, who's now left. It was actually 83% of the voters in Marathon County that voted yes for medical marijuana on the referendum. So the question, Lawrence, is if you were elected, would you end the federal ban on marijuana?
The federal, yes. I would support the legalization of marijuana. And it's not just the idea that it would be, you know, helping the people who like to smoke grass get high. I mean, it's not that at all. I mean, yeah. But what really concerns me is what happens to people who have a substance on them, a substance that has never been shown to have any harmful effect through scientific or medical studies. And nevertheless, here in Wisconsin, they can put somebody in jail, felonize their records for the rest of their life, even though it's been vetted by up to 12 other states now to sell over the counter. I mean, why are people being felonized when this is not a harmful substance? Why does the establishment, especially the Republican Party leadership, still promote that we need to keep this felonized and criminalized? It just doesn't make sense. And I know a lot of you folks, and Farmer, yeah, and a lot of you folks have heard that what the governor of Illinois just made it so all the records of people who were convicted exclusively of a marijuana violation have their records expunged, and I think that's fair. If you can't show harm, and I don't think Tricia's, I don't know, how did she answer that?
Same thing.
Same thing, good. Okay, because I wasn't, you know, I haven't seen her positions, and I'm wearing this thermal underwear. I was so hot I had to get outside, you know, during that whole thing. It's killing me. But yeah, I think that is very important. We have to legalize marijuana. Look how many green new businesses that would create here in Wisconsin. Look how much more revenues that would generate, you know? How many kids would be able to have universal free pre-K, which is so important. It's much more of a way to bring children up having pre-K than spending all these billions. I believe it's well over $1 billion now that they've spent on these charter schools. Yeah, a few of them are good, but generally they are not good for overall, bringing up the overall scores of our kids. But we do know from all the studies on pre-K that this does help them do better in school and also in later life. So why aren't we doing that? Why are we not spending our money there instead of these, you know, charter schools? It does, you know, and so they always say, well, where are we going to get the money? Well, legalize marijuana, for crying out loud. Let's get some farmers out there growing the best weed they can, being the best they can, right?
I'm starting to think we should have started with that question. Anyway, so I really appreciate you, Lawrence. I've got one last question. It's going to be a yes or no answer, and then I'm going to turn the mic over to you to give your closing statement.
All right.
But at the federal level, if you have the opportunity to oppose partisan gerrymandering in any way, would you?
Yeah, that's a no-brainer, eh? Boy, just look at the 28 counties. We have, is it 26 or 28? I can't keep track.
26.
26, and some parcels there. I think Wood County is one of the parcels. Would everybody jot this down? Let's see, I guess I did put something here. Right on the bottom part of the page, it says protectwoodcounty.org, okay? This is a plea from the people of Saratoga about these industrial dairy farms capriciously and arbitrarily moving into their community. No home rule, no community input whatsoever. These operations can come in to the 7th in mass, and I think they're going to, because they're continuing this policy of running the small family farm operations out of business. And and guess who's taking up that volume? We are producing the same, we have the same number of dairy cows now as we had in 2001. I urge everybody to take a look at that investigative report. We have to show our solidarity with these farmers. We can't let any businesses, much less their important business, they provide something that's highly nutritious. It's the best product in the world. It doesn't have all those antibiotics in it that they have to use on these industrial farms to keep these cows from becoming, sickened. And everybody, well, that's why we have sewage systems. We don't leave our crap laying around in the streets anymore like they used to in the old days and have to face cholera. But who knows what can be transferred from these animals to humans? It's such an important question, and we need to bring back the people who have lost their farm for no good reason. If it's the policy of the state to deprive somebody of their livelihood, and it's not because they're not efficient anymore in running their business, this is an attack on a sector of the industry by the Republican leadership in Madison. And I don't know, we can't let them get away with it. We don't want those things up here. I think this is the best, or one of the best organizing tools we can have to show solidarity with our Republican neighbors and with our independent voters and get them to come out and vote. I would encourage them to vote for Lawrence Dale on February 18th to send a message to the state, if for nothing else. We don't have a referendum up here. They want to, if they use my name and vote for me, that is a referendum. And let's send a message, and a strong one. So I hope everybody really bones up on this investigative report. And anyway, I think I'm the best person to take this kind of message public and keep it focused. I know Trish is a lawyer. She has a lot of knowledge about the kinds of things lawyers take care of, and I'm sure she would be very efficient at it. But I'm an organizer. I have experience dealing with big corporations and adversarial situations. And I think I can get this message across to get, and I was going to talk to the Community Action about this. They're very much, did you talk about anything about what Community Action does yet?
I'm going to close with that.
Okay, great, because it's so important. We need to organize the farmers, and I think that Community Action should devote their attention, along with the help of all of you and everybody else who's concerned about this issue, to get out there and get some justice for these farmers. Let's preserve, look at your license plate, that little barn there, America's Dairyland. That is our iconic Wisconsin small business sector and family farm operators. We can't let these people just be swept aside, especially knowing that they are just as efficient now as they were 50 years ago in satisfying the consumer demand for milk. Milk isn't as high demand now as they hoped, but it is level. And the one thing we know about the Republican Party and the leadership thereof, they have an opportunity. Tony Evers has an opportunity. He should be standing up stronger against these industrial dairy farms. So I know I mentioned earlier, he's trying to appropriate $1 million to clean up their mess. We never had to appropriate money to clean up the small family dairy farm operations. So let's, show that we are in solidarity with these farmers and that we are against the injustice that is perpetrated by the Republican Party leadership and campaign in that manner. So is there any, could I, oh, you have to get to your segment. Okay. I was going to see if there's a question or anything.
Nope,
Okay.
thank you very much, Lawrence. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks.